After the events of the Austrian Grand Prix last weekend, it looks like the sudden surge in performance shown by McLaren and Lando Norris has rattled Max Verstappen. For the first time in a few years, he has a constant threat to his domination. With little time to recover and regroup, I think Max Verstappen may just lose the British Grand Prix, and Lando Norris will take the win. McLaren haven't won their home Grand Prix since Lewis Hamilton took his first of 8 wins at Silverstone in 2008. And what of Lewis Hamilton? If he could manage to win, then it would end a 945-day winless streak. It's not out of the question, with both Mercedes drivers at least looking near the pace. Even if they can't quite match Red Bull or Ferrari, Russell's win in Austria shows if anyone is going to pick up the pieces, it would be Mercedes, and possibly Lewis Hamilton. I don't think it will happen. Lando Norris win from Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc bouncing back from an atrocious Austrian Grand Prix.
Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport, and today was the British Grand Prix and a massive turn up for the books as Lewis Hamilton breaks his 945-day winless streak. And it wasn't easy. The weather played a part. There was plenty of people who could have won this race at any point, and in the end it worked out that Lewis Hamilton took the victory, his first since Saudi Arabia in 2021. A lot of people were unlucky, none more than George Russell, and we also had some insane strategies from the likes of Ferrari and Red Bull that impacted one driver each from their teams. Other than that, was this a good race? It was okay. I actually don't really like this in-between weather in terms of motorsport, because if you've watched DTM and you watched the first Norris Ring race this weekend, it was very similar to the Grand Prix in that you're sort of just waiting for the weather, and so you have these long periods where nothing's really happening because everyone's sort of just playing it safe, waiting to see what the weather does, trying to figure out when the best time to come in for tyres. And then you get a couple of people who try and gain a few seconds by trying a different strategy, going on the inters early. So you have a few outliers who try a different strategy, put the inters on early. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Generally, the pack follows what the pack does. And this Grand Prix, whilst during the race you had the race leads swap over a few times as different strategies took place, people pitted at different times onto different tyres, it was really only the last 15 laps or so that was really exciting, because you had Hamilton out front with Norris and Verstappen behind. And at one point it looked like they were going to converge and all three of them were going to be really close together. And it just never happened. Like, Norris dropped off, Verstappen started to catch Hamilton but couldn't quite manage it. And that was the race. There was really no action in the midfield. We didn't really even see much of the midfield. Nico Hülkenberg finished 6th, and honestly we barely saw him on the screens. It was a great result for him, by the way. Great weekend, great qualifying, great race. Really perfect. But I think it shows that this was not the most exciting race in the world, because Hülkenberg started 6th and finished 6th in a Haas. Alexander Albon started 9th and finished 9th in a Williams. The Aston Martins were both in the points this time as well, so I was wrong about them. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy the race. It was entertaining enough. It was an okay race. But I think with the weather, it's better if it's completely dry or completely wet. Even like if it's wet, you only really want one or two of those kind of races a year because they're sort of a novelty. Dry race, maybe we get some action on track, some battling. That's what we really want. And this sort of greasy, damp track that dries out, we don't really get it. And it was a shame, because on paper, on qualifying performances, it looked so tight between the top 5 cars at least. They were all pretty close in times. Leclerc and Perez, terrible qualifyings. Honestly, since Perez signed his Red Bull contract, he has been dreadful. It's not even a case that it's the Red Bull. All this talk about Mercedes was sabotaging Lewis Hamilton. No one looks at Sergio Perez and goes, oh, clearly he's been sabotaged. Something's happening to him. He was never this bad before. Maybe it's just a lack of confidence. Maybe it's just hit him how far he's fallen off pace and he's just got to build himself back up again. Maybe Red Bull will replace him, but obviously it's going to cost them money to get rid of him now because he's under contract. Whereas they could have just let the contract run out and replaced him easily, I think at the end of this year. It's shocking business because he wasn't doing great before he signed the contract, and now he's doing even worse. Charles Leclerc, I think he's just having a bad run of luck. At one point, it really looked like Verstappen, Norris and Leclerc were all going to be kind of close in the championship. Verstappen's not had it all his own way this year, which is more entertaining than it was last year, where he won 15 races and no one really ever saw him. We've had 5 different winners this year, 6 different winners. Leclerc, Sainz, Verstappen, Russell, Hamilton, 5. Piastri looks like he could win a race this year. Perez, you can't count him out completely. So we could get a fair few different winners. Maybe you can get a shock result somewhere else as well when someone random can take a win. But it's nice to see the competition back. Mercedes have clearly made steps forward, which I think is going to frustrate Lewis Hamilton, but he's leaving the team at the end of the year and they've just got their groove back. We'll see if it's just track specific or it's actually genuinely the Mercedes are now back on pace with the front teams. McLaren right up there as well. Red Bull still there. Well, Verstappen still there. Ferrari seem to have dropped back a bit, and I'm sure again that's kind of worrying if you're Lewis Hamilton because you've just won for the first time in 3 years for Mercedes. Everything's going well at the moment, scoring decent points. Both cars, well, Russell broke down unfortunately, but both cars have been scoring decent points. They've won the last 2 races, and you're looking at the Ferraris behind you thinking, I'm going to be driving that next year. Damn it. It's concerning because honestly, at this stage in his career, Lewis Hamilton doesn't want to be moving further back down the field because that's just a slope to the end. And I think he's already done massive amounts of damage to his legacy. Those years of not winning, his win percentage, his stats that a lot of Lewis Hamilton fans were very, very insecure about. Any argument you said about Lewis Hamilton not being the best of all time, they'd come back with his stats. And it doesn't take a brainiac to point out that Formula One's more than stats. And, you know, there's a lot of asterisks after those stats. He's very impressive, and it's an impressive comeback, but he should have retired after 2021. Or 2022 at least. Honestly, when he does retire, people will only remember the 7 championships. It's like Michael Schumacher. You don't remember the Mercedes comeback years. They were pretty grim. But you don't even really remember the average years he had with Benetton before he won the World Championship. You don't really remember his debut for Jordan, which didn't last very long, but he had a really good qualifying. And, you know, Ayrton Senna, you remember the great races. You remember maybe the 2nd place finishing for Tolman, but you don't remember like the rest of the season he had with the Tolman. He got another podium that year for Tolman. And same goes for a lot of drivers. You remember the great results, you don't necessarily remember the mediocre or poor results. Because they're mediocre and poor and they're not that interesting. But I think nowadays people have access to the internet, Wikipedia, any number of websites where you can look things up and see records and stats, and you know, you're going to look at Lewis Hamilton and see, wow, he had probably by the end of his career, I imagine 115, 120 wins. I don't know how far off he is from that, but you're going to look at his win percentage. It's like, oh well, he had nearly 400 races, or probably more than 400 by the time he retires. So it's like 25%. Still impressive, but it was more impressive 2-3 years ago. And I don't like the fact that he has a straight named after him at Silverstone already. Really, I think things like that should be left for when the person has either retired or has died. Senna S is fine. Lewis Hamilton driving down the Lewis Hamilton straights is a bit weird and a bit morbid. It's just something I would, you know, if you have a corner named after you, it's sort of a memorial. He's not dead yet. Or, you know, one day he will retire. Name whatever you want after him at that point. But it's just weird when he's alive and he's driving down his own straights.
Ferrari need a lift, and 3rd and 4th in this race ahead of Mercedes will get them back on track before the 2-week break till Hungary. It'll be the usual story behind. Tsunoda and Gasly in the points. Haas will go backwards. Williams, Stake and Aston Martin nowhere close to the points. It'll be a pretty average race.
Other than that, there's not much to say about this race, honestly. Carlos Sainz was okay. He didn't crash. Piastri, unlucky, but did a good enough job to score decent points for McLaren. Norris, really, it was just about the wrong tyres at the wrong time at the end. Should have put on the mediums. Verstappen, it was a good drive to recover from a poor qualifying, and he was there or thereabouts, and honestly, he just really needs to finish second to keep his championship on track. He beat most of his rivals. I doubt Lewis Hamilton's going to be second place anytime soon. It looked terrible for Leclerc and Perez. Williams did a good job. Even Logan Sargent was fairly impressive at times. I think Yuki Tsunoda scored a point, but I don't even remember seeing much of Daniel Ricciardo. I think Stroll beat Alonso. It's a good result for the Canadian. Yeah, Stake. I'm sure they were there. I don't remember seeing them. Pretty average weekend otherwise. Pretty normal. Honestly, the Formula 3 races were crazy, but even the Formula 2, I honestly think the conditions on track really spoiled the weekend. It would have been nice to have a really sunny weekend at Silverstone, because it's a great track when it's dry. It's a fun track when it's wet. In between, it's nothing special. The best layout for Silverstone as well. It's like that late 90s touring car with the hairpin before bridge. I don't really like the modern layout of Silverstone. It's not awful, but it's not the best it's ever been. And I don't think it really creates too many... I mean, they kept saying there's loads of overtaking opportunities, but is there? Like, maybe if you have a pace advantage, you can get around at Cops, and then maybe at the end of... Well, Stowe, really, isn't it? Is there anywhere else you can overtake at Silverstone? Fairly complex of corners, I suppose. But yeah, it was a decent race. Lewis Hamilton, I think, winning doesn't necessarily... I don't think it's even close to bringing him back into title contention. He had such an average start to the year, but big confidence booster, might do him well for the second half of the year. It's a good... If it's his last win for Mercedes, it's a good send-off to do it at Silverstone because they're based down the road. It's been a good week for England, with England struggling and scraping, but finally getting through in the football, and now the Formula 1 as well at the British Grand Prix. I don't know. I don't really have much more to say about it. I don't know why I'm rambling now. There was a lot of motorsport. I'm watching it as much as I can. There is a lot. I've watched a fair amount. I haven't watched the European Le Mans Series race yet, which is 4 hours. NASCAR, I don't even know if it started. It might have started by now. That's another couple of hours, and I haven't watched Indy NXT. I did watch IndyCar. I did wait till after IndyCar to watch this. So I'll talk about that at some point. Subscribe to the channel. On Tuesday, I'll do a weekend roundup. I do it every week. Fridays, I do prediction videos, and that's where the predictions in this video came from. So make sure you subscribe so you see all of that. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of the British Grand Prix? And just have a good one.